morning. Good morning. Welcome from Warsaw, Małgorzata Bonikowska, the Center for International Relations, a Polish think tank. Welcome to our Tuesday live talk. We do it every Tuesday. We are covering foreign affairs and the situation in the world. We are doing these meetings and live talks together with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation from Germany, a German think tank. Most of the time we discuss the situation in Europe, in our neighborhood, but today we decided to cover something which is extremely important for the Europeans and will influence the world, which is China-India relations. These two giants we are watching with a lot of thoughts, and we would like to understand more how they see themselves and how they see also Europe. We invited for this talk our colleagues from academic sphere, both from China and India. And let me introduce them. Dr. Giri. Hello, Dr. Giri, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Giri speaks to us from Delhi, from Jamia Islamia University. So thank you for accepting our invitation. Arvind Kumar. Hello, Arvind.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Arvind is our dear friend from Manipal University, Southwest India, and he's professor in international affairs. We have implemented several projects together. So these are our Indian colleagues. And on the other side, we have Dr. Yuan. Hello, Hang. You have to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you, so put your mic on.
Hello.
Yes.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Hang is speaking to us from Sichuan University, from Chengdu, right?
Yes.
Okay, and we are waiting for one more person from your university.
Professor Song is already here. He's opened his computer now.
Okay.
So
great. So we have time differences. Our Indian colleagues are 3.5 hours ahead of us. And in Chengdu, what's the time now?
4 p.m.
Oh, we lost the connection.
yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we don't see you.
Oh, what happened? Let me just.
Yeah, let's see how well China is.
Problems.
Okay.
Okay, now you can see me, right? It's 4 o'clock, 4:07, 4:07, 7:16.
So we have 6 hours difference. So I'm glad
Yes.
you're able to have this connection live. So let's move on to the subject. Let me start with maybe with Arvind Kumar. The first question would be briefly, if you can just tell us what is really the current status of China-India relations after these issues we've heard about concerning the border.
Thank you very much, I think, for this invitation. The current situation across India-China border certainly has not been that friendly. The situations really have gone from bad to worse. The crisis which has started from the early part of May really got escalated to a different level now. More and more penetration of China in India's territory, that has really been able to change India's perception of line of actual control. And in that context, what is happening now, that India has been emphasizing more on dialogue with China, try to see that how China gets back to a status quo, but things are basically not getting back to normal. But at the same time, India feels strongly that this has to be resolved at the bilateral level and only through peace dialogue. And how is China really adheres to whatever they commit. So what India perceives, that there is a lack of consistency between China's rhetoric and action. Whatever they say, they have not been able to really adhere to. A number of peace dialogues, a number of dialogues at the commanders level have happened since May of this year. And this has not resulted anywhere near to the withdrawal from whatever they have occupied so far in Galwan Valley. So situation certainly is not good. Things basically have gone from bad to worse, and there is still hope on part of India to see that how India and China resume certain good, constructive, bilateral understanding on this issue.
Okay, let me stop here because, of course, we look at the situation from the European perspective in a way that we are worried when such two powerful countries, fight, and if there are issues between them, like border issues, the whole world is a little bit worried. Let me now ask, because we have Professor Song with us. Thanks for joining. I hope you can hear us, Professor. Can you hear us, Professor Song? We cannot hear you, unfortunately. So let's work on the sound. Let's move on to Dr. Giri. Dr. Giri, if you can just add to what Dr. Kumar said, how India sees this current situation with China, and what could be the solutions in your perspective?
It is a very serious situation. From our point of view, complete lack of trust in the Chinese, because historically, I'm talking of Chinese government, not Chinese people. Historically, we have always extended a hand of friendship to China. In 1959, when I was a young kid, we were dancing in the streets, Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, mean Chinese and Indians are brothers. Then we had this 1962 attack, and our Prime Minister, who put all his faith in Chinese friendship, died of heart attack out of shock of that Chinese betrayal. And I repeat, I'm talking about Chinese government. Since then, despite the war, despite our loss in the war, we have tried to build peace with China. And we have, as I said, always extended a hand of friendship. Our present Prime Minister has met the Chinese Premier Xi Jinping for 8 times, record times, and he tried to make peace and tried to build the so-called Asian century, which was started by Chinese. But what we have is always incursion into our territory, and we are surprised at the Chinese appetite for territory and Chinese really spirit of expansionism. I think it is coming from their government. I don't blame our Chinese friends. It is a government which is totalitarian. It is a government which is led by one dictator. So, they are helpless and the whole world is helpless. And I want to add, Gogo, that it is not between India and China now. It is China and the world. That is the situation. And in fact, there are parallels with Hitler, that how it started Second World War, and we may be on the verge of a Third World War started by the present Chinese government.
Okay, Dr. Giri, you use really very powerful words, especially in the years of the European. So let us move to our Chinese friends. Of course, we are all academicians, we are all experts, so we are trying to comment on what is happening in politics. But maybe you see it slightly differently. What is really the China's perception of this India-China issues? Professor Song, maybe we can start with you, if the sound is now better. Yeah, we cannot hear you, unfortunately. Maybe. In the meantime, maybe Hank, you can comment on that, please. What do you see in China? How is your understanding of what is happening in between these two giants?
Okay, thank you. Well, I would firstly say that I'm not leading expert in India-China relations. I know something about China's foreign policy. According to the basic logic of China's foreign policy now, we would like to see a good neighborhood between China and India. And if there are some conflicts occurred around the border area, while many Chinese people would see properly handle this issues, try to keep the border stability, and try to promote local development, especially economic development and social development. So that's the general idea I can say. If there are more details, I would suggest Professor Song Zhihui give more professional analysis.
Right. Well, Dr. Giri, Professor Giri said more about also people's contacts and people emotions, sentiments. Can you just briefly tell us, you are a professor of international relations, you teach international relations, you must also have a certain narrative about India, your neighbor. What is the perception of Indian government in China now?
Should I say, or
yes,
Professor Song to
Professor
answer?
Song, I hope we can hear you. Professor, can you just try to unmute?
Yeah, I tried, but
yeah, now we hear you. Yes.
Huh?
Now we can hear you.
But it's
again, we cannot hear you again, unfortunately.
you have to unmute.
Yes.
You have to unmute Professor Song. I pressed unmute.
Yes, now it's fine.
Huh?
Now it's fine. So,
into
consideration, you are an expert on India and China relations. Could you explain to us what is the perception of China? What is the perception of India in China?
Can you hear me right now? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, again, Professor Song, we cannot hear you. I think you are in one room, right? Is it? That's the problem, because we have a double sound effect. So only one of you can speak. So Professor Song, can you unmute yourself? Yes? Please go ahead. Well, again, we cannot hear you. Maybe you can sit together with Professor Hank. Hank, so let's go back to you, because we hear you very well. So once again, my question would be, how do you see India in China? What is the perception of your neighbor?
Okay, I can say the many Chinese people's idea about China-India relations. In their eyes, India is a neighbor. It shares many years, wow, very long history in past 5,000 years, especially in cultural exchanges. And recent, and in the last 100 years, we had shared the similar experience fighting for national independence. And after that, after the World War II, we had similar experience in how to say, the regaining momentum in social and economic developments. The both countries grouped into the so-called third world category. So basically, we are both developing countries now with large population and vast majority population in India, and also similar parts in China and rural population. So we face similar pressures to get economic and social development.
But you know, Donald Trump had said recently that if China is a developing country, he wants also the US be called developing country.
I would take his message as a joke. Everyone in this world know that USA is totally not developing country.
Well, but that's the question, you know, the question, let's move back to the Indian colleagues. You look at China with, you know, very close perspective. It's the neighbor. We in Europe, we are also looking at Asia with growing concerns. What would be your description of, you know, the China's approach to the foreign policy and to the neighbors, not only India, generally? Arvind, what is the game China is playing, in your opinion?
China, until recently, wanted to be seen as unipolar in Asia in a multipolar world. But now what has happened, the perception of themselves have got completely changed. They want to be seen as a preeminent power in the world. And in that context, their footprints in Indo-Pacific region, their footprints elsewhere in the world, both through the landmass connectivity and the maritime connectivity, they would like to really, through their Belt and Road Initiative, they would like to achieve those ends. But there are a lot of impediments. In fact, if China really is serious with regard to getting accepted by the rest of the world, it has to really behave with certain accountability, certain responsibility. It's not that you become preeminent, whether you can really lead the world affairs and how that would really be seen, something which could really be more acceptable by the rest of the world in general and India in particular. So most
But
of these
Arvind, let me
behavioral
just
patterns.
ask you here. Let me just ask you, because this is exactly what China, it seems, is trying to do, at least as a narrative. We've heard the UN speeches of the leaders, and the speech of the President Xi Jinping was very much aligned with what you are saying. He presented himself as a leader of a country who wants to fit very well into global challenges, such as climate change, such as, you know, poverty, all this. So as far as the speeches are concerned, China very well fits into what you are describing as a very responsible partner. Arvind? Hello? Dr. Giri, maybe you can comment on that. How do you see such declarations? Dr. Giri, you have to unmute yourself. You have to again unmute yourself.
Right.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So like Arvind said in his initial remarks, there is a huge difference between Chinese rhetoric and action. You know, Xi Jinping made a wonderful speech in the United Nations, but look at what he has done. He has elected himself for life. He has eliminated violently all his opposition. You know, he has one man rule in Chinese politics. So, and you look at their foreign policy. On the one hand, I do not, in fact, I have sympathy with my fellow panelist from China. What he says sounds very good. And that is what perhaps the people of China think. But look at their government. There is no connect to the people and the government here. There is no democracy. It is one party rule. Now it is a one-man dictatorship. Xi Jinping has concentrated all the powers in himself. So, you know, you cannot take, I started by saying there is a trust deficit. We do not trust the Chinese anymore, you know, Chinese government anymore. You know, our 60 years of experience has been that of a betrayal, deception, and backstabbing. You see, Modi, as I said, met the president like no other head of our state has met him. Yet, you know, what we have is an incursion into our border. You see, the Chinese army has moved in. They said we had an agreement that in the border we'll maintain peace and tranquility in our 1993 agreement. No firing, no violence. And on 15th of June, 20 of our soldiers were murdered. You know, our colonel went to meet them unarmed. That is the protocol. When you go to meet your you know, other side, you don't go with any arms. He went alone with two of his bodyguards, and when he was returning in a premeditated attack, he was attacked and he was killed. You see, and then they were prepared to attack our army, and we are not prepared. And the whole world knows that 20 people were killed. And like I said, even the Chinese professor I was reading recently, who is an expert on India and China, he himself said that, the whole world is against us. So, Gogo, I want you to realize, and I want the Europeans to realize, it is not India and China anymore. It is China and the rest. Europe has failed to realize that. It is time they realize it sooner.
Okay, I think Europe also is having certain verification of its position towards what's happening in the world, especially towards this raising China-US rivalry. We are in the middle, and we wouldn't like to have the world again going bipolar. We are talking very openly about heading towards a second Cold War. But instead of Soviet Union, we have China. So we are very worried about this scenario. But let me move to Hang. Hang, could you, answering to our Indian colleagues and their interpretation, could you explain to us a little bit better, how do you think, as international relations expert, what is really China doing? What is the foreign policy of China right now?
Okay. Firstly, I don't want to go to very details about the border conflict issues. Of course, so far I'm not really having these details, but I heard something about that. I can generally say from the perspective of foreign policy of China, well, as I mentioned before, Chinese people, we would like to have good neighborhood relations with Indian people. That's for sure. That's for sure. I guess the vast majority of Chinese people would agree with that. So we don't want to go to any kind of conflict, especially the border conflict and more serious conflicts with India. Because if we go to some kind of war or kind of conflicts, that would not serve both interests of our two countries. So in the fundamental interest of two countries, we need to talk. We need to have more dialogues about how to properly handle those issues, including border conflict issues. So, and on the other hand, I would say there are much opportunity for both countries to cooperate, especially international trade, investment, and other very important issues. So this is the perspective of Chinese people, I would say.
Yes, but that's okay. So let's move on towards a wider perspective, because the fundamental question that Giri is also putting is that this India-China now tensions is just, one of many examples of Chinese changed approach to the world, and that could be like really the issue, as China is facing now the phase that you're somehow expanding, and you are thinking maybe in a different way about not only the neighborhood, but about your own position of your own country in the global map. So my question would be, you can just tell us, how would you describe this approach? How would you describe the key lines of foreign policy of China today?
I would think this is a very good question. And from perspective of academic research, in the past 3 years, I also spent much time on this topics about how to understand China's approach to the world, if I understand your question correctly, right? And I would think this is very interesting question for not only for Chinese people, but also other peoples, including Indian people and also European people and the people in the United States. They are more concerned about this.
But
I know
the
that.
answer is even more interesting. What would be the answer to such an interesting question?
Okay, I will say that. First, according to my research, academic research, there are some misconceptions about China's approach to the world. On the one hand, Chinese people, I mean, from the perspective of China and Chinese people and Chinese government, they would like to manage the relations between China and the rest of the world, especially with big powers and neighboring countries. Of course, now the fundamental task for China is to develop economically and socially to achieve the objectives or goals set by Chinese government to get more prosperity and to have more opportunities for social and economic development. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, how to tell this story of China to the world is really a huge question. And we, I mean, based on my research, we found that some Chinese people, including some officials, they are not very good at form discourse and narratives to others, especially to international audience. So that is from my perspective is one major sources of misconception. If we explain clearly what we do, what we want to the world more clearly, more systematically, and then the audience would get a correct message, I would say, or more accurate message. So otherwise they would be fearing a rising China would be a threat to the world. But actually, we are not a threat.
But Hang, let me just tell you, that seems to be exactly opposite to what the Indian colleagues are telling us. That what they said was that you have a very good narrative, but the facts are completely different. So you are good in speaking about it, but
no. Actually, according to my research, sorry, we are not good at form discourse. So I would say that is one major reasons. The friends in India and the friends in other countries, people in other countries, they get some misconceptions about China. Actually, we are not that aggressive, even not that assertive in international relations. We try to keep good manners, especially try to contribute more to global governance. You see, in United Nations activities in the world, we contribute a lot to development in developing countries. We give more assistance to developing countries for their economic and social affairs. And we also contribute a lot to international peacekeeping activities. You know that. And we are also very active in supporting global governance or climate change.
Okay.
We do a lot, but we are not good at talking. So that's why people would say, yeah, China is not that as expected. So I'm sorry for this.
Okay, let's move again to the Indian friends. Let's look at really the global perspective. Now, Dr. Giri, let's argue. Let's argue what are really the Chinese actions from your perspective in the global perspective. When we talk about China, Europe, when we talk about China, US, when you talk about Chinese presence in Africa, how would you describe this Chinese foreign policy from the perception of Indian expert on international affairs? Dr. Giri.
Okay, under the present regime, Gogo, I echo what Arvind said, that China wanted to be numero uno, premier power in the world. They want to revive their historic glory of being the world power. So their approach to the entire of the world is similar. Look at what is happening in Hong Kong, Taiwan, South China Sea. They have neighbors with 14 countries, and they have conflict with all the 14 countries. Japan, Philippines. I mean, you know it. So that is China's position. And I love what my friend Professor is saying from China. But that is his perspective. He's such a good man. But that is not his government. There's a big disconnect between Chinese civil society. There is one. They have never been active because of the totalitarian government. But you have people like him. It is really music to my ears what he is saying. But what his government is doing is exactly the opposite. I am sorry, he doesn't know what his government is doing really. And Xi Jinping is, I would say, from research I am saying, it is not rhetoric. He is Hitler Mark II. You see, this is the worry that we should all see. And Europe, I want to say, in my studies, I have interviewed officials in Brussels. Europe did not see it. Problem with the West, Gogo, is that they build up a monster. Then they go out to fight, whether it is Saddam Hussein or Syria or China now. You see, when they were doing trade, when European Union was created, it was created with wonderful political values. Human rights, civil liberties, democracy, pluralism. These were the values of European Union. That is why European Union was created. I am a hardcore advocate of European Union. Not only I studied it, and I thought this was the biggest experiment in pulling sovereignties and bringing several countries together into one union. But what did they do in the trade? They became merchants. So the disconnect between European trade and politics, you see, was also the responsible. Look at the investment. You pick up anything in Europe, it is built in China. Fair enough. You had cheap labor, you went there. But you had Tiananmen Square. You had a military dictatorship, autocracy in China. One communist power. Soviet Empire has fallen. Chinese Empire, you built up, Gogo.
It's interesting, Dr. Giri, when we hear you, it's very interesting because it sounds like our American colleagues also raising this issue. Let's stop here for a minute because I want to ask Arvind. Arvind, could you tell us from your security perspective, because you are an expert in geopolitics and security issues, how would you describe the Chinese politics in this domain, and how would you describe the Indian answer to that?
So there is no denying the fact that China has made the rest of the world highly vulnerable. And the way they are really getting their interest spread, especially in terms of creating their sphere of influence, that really has been creating a lot of instability. India, for example, obviously has been witnessing a lot of the challenges from China. India is being encircled by China. The way China has come in a big way in India's neighborhood, that obviously poses a lot of challenges to India's security. And a lot of actions which China has undertaken, especially in the context of not adhering to any of the legal norms, any of these international treaties, any of these mutual agreements. In fact, the last 25 years or 30 years, almost 30 years, India-China came up with 5 confidence building measures agreement. And none of these confidence building measures agreements really have been adhered to by China. So you can just see that how inconsistent they are, especially in terms of achieving peace and stability. And through their action, the challenges become more and more immense, especially in the context of having the peace in the region. China has been well exposed in the whole world now. I think the whole world has to understand China's psychological intentions, China's behavioral patterns, and what is their fundamental goal. I think very good question you asked to our Chinese colleague. What is China's fundamental goal? What China wants to achieve? How they have been projecting in their foreign policy orientation? These are very crucial questions. It's now high time that the rest of the world in general, and India in particular, they have to really converge on this singular issue of China's growing influence, and also how is that can really be seen as highly detrimental to global peace and stability. India and European Union, they have to work together on these many issues, especially in the context of understanding China's increasing footprints. because that is going to prove detrimental for European Union also. Until recently, India was considering China as an opportunity. Now China is being perceived as a threat to India. And that is something which I think India has to bring in its larger lexicon of key policy issues.
Okay, let us move on to Hank. You've heard so many, issues raised by our Indian colleagues. I would like, first of all, to give you a chance to answer to this, but also to present how would you like to describe this foreign policy of China if you say that you don't have a right narrative, that many Chinese politicians don't do it in a correct way. So what would be the correct way? And also I would like you to comment on the EU situation, because you are an expert in European Union and you cover European Union in your research. So what would be the Chinese policy towards Europe? Again, you have to unmute yourself. Hank, we don't hear you. We don't hear you. We don't hear you.
Please unmute.
Yes, you have to unmute yourself. Yes. No. I just hope that's not a
please unmute.
Silence.
Professor Hank, please unmute.
I think there is a technical problem on the Chinese side. We cannot hear you, unfortunately. So waiting for Hank, in case you are able to unmute, just let me know. Let me move on again then to the Indian colleagues about the European perception of Europe today, because for us, speaking from Warsaw, of course, the approach of the European Union to what is happening between China and US, but also the approach to the changed world is a key issue. We discuss it all the time. But how would you see European Union's approach to the global challenges, and what would you expect from the EU also to do? Dr. Giri, maybe we start from you.
Right. I would love to answer that, Gogo, but just one more thing about China. Why some of us are so agonized. You know what we did for China when the United Nations permanent membership was offered to us. We said no, give it to China. We are on record. Let about Chinese friend read their history. We said no, give it to China. They deserve it more. Then, you know, when we were ready with the bomb before the China was ready, our prime minister said no, we'll not go for a bomb now. Now China is blocking us both in United Nations as well as NSG, nuclear supplier group. Okay, to answer your question, so we have done everything. They're occupying 4,000 square kilometers of our land since 1962. Despite that, we wanted to do business with them, thinking that we'll resolve it. But again, they want more territory. European Union, you asked me the question, pointed a question on European Union. Well, we wanted European Union to emerge as a center of world power. When Soviet Union collapsed, we thought there is another alternate power center in Europe, because the values that European Union presented is unique, better than United States or Soviet Union. You see, it had no imperial motives, it had no aggrandizement, but European Union, for various reasons, we may not have time to talk because of some internal contradictions. The political arm of European Union, the political dimension of European Union did not emerge as it should have. And that's a disappointment for the whole world. It started as a customs union, but it ended as a political union, but it did not progress far. So that's our disappointment. If European Union was more assertive, then I think world would be different, because they represent the admirable political values better than anyone. So we would expect that European Union pulls itself together, and now Britain is out, which had always a divergent voice. So you are more coherence in decision making. So if European Union becomes internationally more assertive and more vocal, it would be good for the world. That is what we expect from European Union.
Thanks. That's something we are working on with, you know, a lot of patience. We still have some issues, but we still have some successes. Like, for example, we are able altogether 28 states, now 27, to stick with sanctions towards Russia after 2014 and the issue of Crimea. So that's an example of the fact that sometimes, maybe not very often, we are able to take decisions, you know, unanimously. Now we have issues with Belarus. Here we are appending a list of sanctions, and we have a situation you are talking about, that one country blocks the others from taking decisions. So it's definitely a lot to do in the EU. Arvind, if I can move to you, because Hank, are you able to speak or not yet? Any chance? We still don't hear the sound. No, we cannot hear the sound. We see you very well, but we cannot really hear what you're saying. So Arvind, if I can move to you for a minute, if you can comment on these two summits. We had European Union China summit, and you had in the same time, we had European Union India summit. So both these countries are very much important on the European agenda. How would you describe the effects of these summits? And also what would be, in your opinion, you know, the perspective for the months to come? What can happen?
I think India's approach towards European Union needs to be changed now. I think it's high time that India has to have certain very specific, consistent policy towards European Union, because European Union now is coming in a big way to India. And that perhaps has to be understood by India. And that is something which India has to evolve. I think in all the domains which they discussed, including the advances in the science and technology they discussed counterterrorism, they discussed, in fact, trade and commerce. So all these aspects become very, very pertinent for India and the European Union. So India will remain very important for European Union and vice versa. I think that engagement needs to be flourishing in the foreseeable future. We can't just be keeping ourselves in isolation. I think this is high time now that there should be a very constructive, strategic engagement between European Union and India. And that perhaps is going to happen. This is what is my understanding.
This is important for us, if I may interrupt, because we know also that from Indian perspective, the bilateral relations with some countries, especially UK, but also France, Germany, were more intense than the relationship with the whole bloc of 28.
Correct. What happens that India has to deal with all the members of European Union as well as with Brussels. I think India-EU is one separate thing. But as the bilateral level, I think India has been evolving fairly well with a number of countries among the members of European Union. And the time has come now to look all the members by India as a whole, as a part of European Union. And that is what I think is the expectations of the European Union. Question is that India has been engaging at the bilateral level with many of the members of European Union, and that is yielding certain dividends. But at the same time, I think it's high time that European Union and India are talking about the larger picture, which has to arise. And unless that happens, I don't think that European Union and India can ever think of having certain good bilateral engagement. With regard to China, I think China is still being perceived by European Union not as an opportunity anymore. China is perceived by European Union as a threat. And this threat obviously is very serious. And how that has to be managed, whether it has to be managed by evolving certain engagements with India or exploring new partners. That is what exactly is the larger questions before the members of a strategic community. This issue of European Union and China in every sphere has really been experiencing a lot of inherent contradictions. And these contradictions have to be managed largely by evolving certain engagements with other partners or other countries. And India is going to be fitting into this very well.
I think we cover, very carefully India-China relations, and you seem to cover quite, carefully also the EU position and the member states countries towards China and towards India as well. I do confirm we are having a closer and closer look at India as a possible partner in Asia. And we are also reflecting on the new approach towards China, seeing it, well, partly as a threat, partly as a competitor. But we are having also issues within the European Union. We have different approaches towards China by different member states still, and we don't have a very clear one stand on how to handle raising China and how to also handle the problem of China-US tensions. Hang, are you able to resolve the sound problem? Because we would love
He has to unmute. Please unmute. Yeah.
Just, you know, you unmute, you put your microphone
Please unmute,
on, but
Hang,
the
please
sound doesn't come. No, we cannot.
Hang, please come, Hang, you speak.
Because it would be very good to hear the Chinese answer to all these. No. No.
He was doing very good. What happened to him? He should unmute first. He has not unmuted.
He's unmute, but anyway, I just want to comment, to repeat some comments on Facebook. We have people looking at our conversation. And one of the issues still commented is this India-China border issues. And the question would be, you know, if this is not to be resolved in the nearest future, it seems unlikely, how, and you cannot change the geopolitics. China and India are neighbors, and the border is quite long between these two giants. So how would you, what would be the scenarios for the future? How do you visualize the, you know, the relationship in 2030, for example? Dr. Giri, can you put us some scenarios, some perspective on this?
Well, the border dispute or a face-off between India and China has lasted for the one that I remember 8 years. So this standoff might also continue, but we have reached a point of no return. And some of us, at least my perspective, is that unless the regime in China changes, you know, India cannot breathe peacefully, nor will the world. And Europe is far off, they don't see it. China is our neighbor. Europe sees it a bit late, that is the thing, but we have seen it. And I am not worried personally, because as I said in the beginning, it is China versus the rest. You see, and China represents authoritarianism, no freedom, no democracy, no rule of law. That's one side. Like once it was between US, the free world, and the Soviet Union. It is the same now. So one American scholar said China has replaced Soviet Union. And one perceptive journalist said three things, Gogo, and I hold on to that. He said that Soviet empire will fall, Germany will be united, and Chinese empire also will fall. So it is question of time, it will fall, and we are pretty sure that it is history repeats and Chinese empire has to fall. You know, Tibet will be liberated one day, Uyghurs will be liberated, Eastern Mongolia will be liberated. You see, if you look at the mainland China and you take 5 occupied territories, China then would be peaceful, the whole world would be peaceful. And how they took Tibet, you see, they wanted to build a road, and Nehru, our prime minister, agreed it was an independent country, and they sent their army. So anyway, the whole world knows it, we don't have to repeat it. But coming to, you asked me the scenario, what will happen? I think the one possible scenario is that Chinese regime has to change. They will have to have, like Soviet Union, they are not fully democratic, but yes, they will go for democracy. Xi Jinping's dictatorship will fall. And friends like Han, you know, their voice will be heard. They are saner voice and the voice of sanity, liberty, and goodwill. And such voice should prevail. And he now at the moment he is an academic, he represents civil society, but it is the government that is problematic. Xi Jinping, as I said, I repeat, you know, Hitler Mark II, it has to fall. It will be good for China and it will be good for the rest of the world. So I am not worried. You know,
okay, that's the one scenario. If this situation, internal situation in China changes, can be another scenario as well. If this is not going to happen, then?
If it is not going to happen, of course, India will protect its territory. We are having an internal political fight about where we have faltered for last 60 years by putting all our faith in Chinese and trusting them, including the present government. You know, so we have reached a point where we have to take China on. And if the world does not see it, if China's regime doesn't fall, then we will defend ourselves with all our might, you know, through dialogue, through, if necessary, through force. And Chinese understand the use of force, like Mao Zedong said, the power flows from the barrel of the gun. So perhaps they would like, you know, it is not 1962 that we are not prepared. Our army was not allowed to fight. We have a third strongest army in the world, a fighting dedicated army. So if dialogue does not solve it, we will take them on militarily.
Okay, well, that's not
That
a
is
very
second
optimistic
scenario.
perspective for the world, taking into consideration that we are talking about really military, very powerful countries and with nuclear power as well. Arvind, because unfortunately, Hang, I don't think we can resolve the problem of your microphone. No, we cannot hear you. So maybe you can log off and log on again.
No.
Maybe. Oh, now.
Yeah, yes. I will try that.
No. Now we are hearing you, Hang. Just continue.
Now it's okay. Oh, okay. Can I say you hear me now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the technical problems. I would answer your two questions you mentioned before. The first, how to see China's foreign policy. Actually, can I first talk a joke? I mean, actually, that's a true story. When I was participating in an international academic meeting, the topic was related to China's foreign policy. And the very interesting thing is that if some people had their assumption that China is bad, and then they can always find they can always reach the conclusion that China is bad. For example, if China is strong, they would say China is threatening the whole world. And if China is too weak or too much weak, and they also worried about China will make troubles because the social and economic development is not that high level, and there would be huge population in Hungary and lost jobs, and that's another kind of disaster. So whatever China would be, either strong or weak, in their minds, China is bad and China is to be blamed. So that's the joke. Actually, that's my personal story. I experienced that story. So if some people, they have their logic already in their mind that China is bad, is to be blamed, and whatever they observe, they can always talk that China is bad and China is to be blamed. So what I would like to say is that stop blaming China and please go to China, talk to people, and you will find another story, broaden your horizon and your research. And what I mean, in one word, probably if you get out of that assumption about China, you will find another side of China. China is beautiful, China is peaceful. We are not that fighting every day. No, we are people love peace, you know. And
but that's what Dr. Giri stressed, that he is not talking about people. He's talking about the foreign policy of a country in the neighborhood.
Okay, the foreign policy is based on people's opinion. If a foreign policy is not supported by the vast majority of people, then the foreign policy is just paper. It's nothing.
That can happen in democracies.
And according to my observation, most Chinese people are strongly support China's China's current foreign policy because, for example, OBOR, probably you heard about that, One Belt, One Road. I know that my friends in India, some of them, they don't like OBOR. but many other peoples in other countries in Asia and even in Europe, in other countries, the OBOR is a very good idea to have some connections between different countries, and that means job opportunities by roads and bridges building. Of course, some people would concern about the environmental implications by the connectivity building. But that's another issue. Whatever you do, you would have some climate change footprints, right? We can handle that properly. We can think about, we can try to find solutions to that. But anyway, to have to push forward international trade, international investment, and cooperation, especially to cope with global challenges such as climate change. That's more important thing than, I mean, some kind of minor border issues. Of course, we have some issues, but I don't think conflict is a good solution. I would personally, and also many of my friends here and colleagues here, we believe that talks and dialogues are much better ways to do that.
Han, because you couldn't talk for a while. Han,
about China's foreign policy in India and China, and many people, they don't know the whole story. They just read news, read some media reports, but they don't realize this kind of media news coverage be I mean, preferred by some people, but not telling people the objective story. So I would calling for more observations, to listen to more voices, and especially for foreigners, if they don't know about China, the best way is go to China, talk to people, and to see what there happened, not just to get some message from media, especially from United States media. They have more fake news, you know that? Even Trump talked about that. And a second question, I would say, how China see EU. Well, actually, since it's launched the project of European integration, China's approach to EU is basically supportive, especially years after 1975. China and the European community has established diplomatic relations, and after that, China is always on the side of European integration. That's for sure. Even there are some voices from some European member states, they have their own ideas, but basically on the side of China, we, Chinese government and Chinese people, we are basically like European integration, and because that's the good solution for many years conflicts in European history. And only after the European integration, European countries, especially European EU member states, have entered a better way to have stability and prosperity. So if you talk to Chinese people, ordinary Chinese people, they have more positive image about EU and European integration.
Okay, if I may put the last question to both of you, actually, to three of you. It's a question from our audience concerning also the role of the United Nations. We're just celebrating 75 years, and we just heard all the speeches of the leaders. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was mentioning in his speech the fact that India is out of the Security Council, permanent membership, and this is the aspiration of India. The question would be, how do you see the future of this organization, and how also you see the future of the Security Council? And Hank, first with you, because you couldn't speak for a long time. Would you ever support, as China, would you ever support Indian membership in the Security Council?
You mean myself?
Well, China.
As a political scientist or Chinese people?
China. You are...
well, I heard a lot of voices here about the Security Council. I mean, but firstly, I would say Chinese people basically love United Nations, and we would like to contribute to the United Nations activities. And for Security Council, well, some people here, they're worried about Security Council was for so long dominated by the United States, and we try to keep balance. I mean, try to support the multilateralism, because UN framework is good channel for support multilateralism. And for India's membership in a Security Council, I personally, I would love more influential roles of India in United Nations system. And well, that's also my basic logic. For me, myself, I love Indian people, and I don't think India as a threat to Chinese people. And both we are developing countries, we have huge population, and the only way for me, the best way, is to go together, to cooperate more, and that would be great for the stability and prosperity for the future of the whole world. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So the same question to you, friends from India, then Arvind first and Dr. Giri as your last comment. Arvind?
I think India shall not ask for the permanent membership of the Security Council. It should be conferred automatically. India deserves this. The way India's responsibility has increased in the international system, that should really allow India to be a part of this Security Council. I think India shall not ask for the membership. It should be conferred. This is what I feel strongly. But at the same time, the way geopolitical environment had changed since 1945, there should be a complete restructuring of the United Nations system. If the UN has to be working with effectiveness, if the United Nations does not restructure the way things are unfolding, it will lose its relevance. This is what I think strongly with regard to the United Nations at 75. It's high time that institution needs complete revamping.
Clear and sound. Dr. Giri?
Yeah, I will endorse what Arvind said, but except that like a majority of Indians is dreamy idealist that it will be conferred in India. It doesn't happen that way. But yes, United Nations is high time it is restructured. It can't be left to 5 permanent members who have lost all the harmony between themselves. Soviet Union had disintegrated when it was the permanent member. And now you see China. So unless it is restructured, I agree with Arvind, it will lose its relevance. So there should be more, not only India, there should be more permanent members in the UN Security Council. And this veto power should be lifted. It should be majority voting, not veto. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Unfortunately, our time is over. We would love to discuss it more, because I agree with Hang that we should really talk more and we should really interact and try to understand each other better. That's what we are trying to do in the Center for International Relations, and also Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which has an excellent network also in Asia, and it's active both in China and in India. So I truly believe we are able to have more talks like today with less technical problems, hopefully. So I would stop here. Thank you very much for your participation. Thanks for your time. Dr. Giri?
One small request that, if you can influence the Chinese government, Professor Han should be sent to India as Chinese ambassador. We'd love to have him.
I think maybe the world will be definitely better if there are more experts somehow involved into what the politicians are trying to do. So hopefully your voice will be heard, and mine as well. So thank you a lot, Hang Yuan, Dr. Giri, and Arvind Kumar. Thanks a lot, and please join us next Tuesday, every Tuesday, 10 o'clock on Facebook. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.